Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Alan K. Rohde. I am the author of Michael Curtiz, A Life in Film, and Charles McGraw, Film Noir Tough Guy, in addition to being Director-Treasurer of the Film Noir Foundation. During the next 99 minutes, I'll be discussing the making of Secret Beyond the Door as intertwined with the life and career of legendary director Fritz Lang, producer Walter Wanger, and star Joan Bennett, among other involved parties. Secret Beyond the Door is a checkered, and many might say unfortunate film that tarnished the storied career of Lang and affected nearly everyone else prominently involved in the picture. I'll attempt to address both its perceived virtues as well as its vices. Fritz Lang was born in Austria in 1890. His father was Catholic and his mother was Jewish. Lang was raised as a Catholic. He left home in 1910 and traveled to France, painting and becoming addicted to the early crime movies of French director Louis Fayard. This animated dream sequence was created for the film by Walt Disney Studios. Originally, animator Walter Lantz, the inventor of Woody Woodpecker no less, was tasked with this scene, but it didn't work out. Later, the sequence was given to abstract visual artist and animator Oscar Fissinger, but his tests were considered unsatisfactory, so Disney eventually produced the scene. This is also the beginning of the voiceover narration by the film star Joan Bennett, which was one of several controversial characteristics of the film. Fritz Lang originally decided to use a different actress's voice as an unusual second-person voiceover to describe Bennett's action during the film. This seemingly inexplicable decision upset Bennett and her husband, producer Walter Wanger. Lang would be eventually overruled on this aspect of the picture, and Bennett's voiceover was dubbed in during post-production. Production on the film began on February 10, 1947, with this wedding scene. The film's male star, Michael Redgrave, stated in his memoir that Lang directed a continual stream of corrective comments towards Bennett during the filming of this scene, like, "Don't close your mouth, Joan. No, don't close your mouth. I said don't. Cut. Do you think you could leave your mouth a little open, Joan, honey?" After Lang printed the shot, Bennett stalked off the set, mumbling, "He thinks I'm a puppet." Lang's granular direction was a singular characteristic of his perfectionist personality that permeated all of his films, but particularly this one. That's actor Paul Cavanaugh, seated behind the desk, playing Joan Bennett's brother. Cavanaugh usually portrayed a cultured gentleman because he was one. He was a Cambridge-educated lawyer who turned to acting reportedly after he lost $22,000 on the turn of a Monte Carlo roulette wheel. Several of Cavanaugh's additional scenes, including his death, were cut out of the film prior to its general release, so his appearance in the film was truncated down to this single scene. Back to Fritz Lang. He eventually returned from France to Vienna to serve in the Austro-Hungarian army during World War I, where he was wounded 3 times. His notorious affectation of a monocle worn in his left eye was either due to a war wound or an anecdote he told about an exploding Klieg light on a 1920s Berlin film set. The monocle story is a singular instance of Lang's fabulous life that he scripted throughout his whole lifetime. The compartmentalized mythology of Fritz Lang's existence was alternately seasoned with untraceable fiction, outright lies, along with a dollop of truth, and it turned out to be one of the director's most significant productions. Lang was quoted as saying, "My private life has nothing to do with my films." Of course, the truth was exactly the opposite. Secret Beyond the Door might be the most emblematic example of how a film director's personality and private life influenced his work. Joan Bennett is with actor James Say in this scene, wearing a suit of that time that had lapels that looked like Cadillac tail fins. Say was a durable character actor who began his Hollywood career in 1940. He played such roles as a lab technician in T-Men, a trench-coated copper in The Asphalt Jungle, and a doctor in Miracle on 34th Street. Starting out, Lang wrote scripts for producer Erich Palmer and director Joe May at UFA Studios in Berlin. He came into his own with Dr. Mabuse the Gambler in 1921, followed by a pair of legendary Germanic fantasy films, The Nibelungs in 24, of course the iconic Metropolis in 27, The Woman in the Moon in 1929, all for UFA, and then the classic early talkie M in 1931, starring the great Peter Lorre. See how Lang's camera just effortlessly glides through this scene of a Mexican market on the Universal lot. And we see the effervescent Natalie Schafer with Bennett during this scene. Schaefer's character in this film was a warm-up for her signature role as Mrs. Thurston Howell III in the 1960s TV series Gilligan's Island. This knife fight is a typical example of Lang's propensity for displaying violence in his films.
Come on. What's wrong with you?
But as the camera dollies into Bennett, there's another aspect to this scene that was subtle enough to skirt the Production Code Authority Censor's office. Watch and listen how Bennett's character becomes sexually turned on while observing this confrontation.
A woman and two men. You may have known her now. Fighting for her with naked knives. Death was in that street. And I felt how proud she must be.
That knife and the table gag is the type of shot you'd expect to see in a Mr. Moto movie.
Son, I felt that someone was watching me. There was a tingling at the nape of my neck.
Yes, Lang had to keep the tingling at Bennett's neck rather than elsewhere to placate the censors. And then we see enter Michael Redgrave, who was Lang's second choice for the male lead in this picture. Lang originally attempted to cast James Mason, but he didn't have a script yet. So he sent Mason a cover letter with a copy of the Rufus King story from Red Book magazine upon which the script would be based. Mason demurred.
Let's go. When you finally snapped out of your trance, you looked as though you'd seen death.
Fritz Lang was notorious for bullying actors, but Natalie Schafer didn't take any guff from him. Lang's secretary, Hilda Rolfe, witnessed Lang abusively yelling at Schafer during the production of this film. She told me Schafer hollered right back at him, asking him whom the hell he thought he was speaking to. Lang backed down like most bullies will do when properly confronted. By the way, the pair of straws in Bennett's drink during this scene were scotch taped together personally by Lang, who cut a take because he didn't like how Bennett's mouth looked when she sipped her drink.
I sent you to the way because I'd planned my strategy. I wanted to meet him on my own terms. Not his.
Michael Redgrave admired Lang tremendously. He had watched Lang's silent films when he was a student in Heidelberg, Germany. After Mason opted out, Lang screened the anthology film Dead of Night that included Redgrave's turn as a demented ventriloquist. He sent Redgrave 50 pages of script, and that was that. Redgrave was in, and he would make his American film debut in Secret Beyond the Door. To give Redgrave the proper Hollywood introduction, Lang met him at Los Angeles' Union Station as his train pulled in, as both the director and his new star posed for photographers. Most of Lang's German films were co-written with his then-wife, Thea von Harbaugh. His marriage turned into more of a partnership that ended when Lang left Germany after the Nazis took power in 1933. After the Nazis banned Lang's latest movie, The Testament of Dr. Mabuse, he departed the country. Lang later peddled this fabulous version of being summoned by Hitler's propaganda minister, Joseph Goebbels. There was a clock ticking, he had money sewn into his pockets, and he he fled on the next train out of Berlin. This story was debunked as a typical Langian fabulist invention by his biographer Patrick McGilligan, who examined Lang's passport records and documentation for that era very carefully. At any event, he went to France, where he made a movie, Ferenc Molnar's Lilium, starring Charles Boyer. It's interesting that Lilium was probably the only film that Lang felt sentimental about in his old age. His reputation, built on his films in Germany, intrigued American producers, and Lang was signed by David O. Selznick in the spring of 1934, and he arrived in Hollywood. Major adjustments were required by European immigrants to Hollywood during those times. Many of them just couldn't make it work. The great Max Reinhardt made only one U.S. film and then decided to teach acting. Joe May, under whom Lang labored as a screenwriter, became flummoxed by the studio system assembly line and eventually opened a restaurant. The film director might have been king in Europe, but studio heads, producers, and movie stars ruled in Hollywood. The painstaking and endless experimentation by Lang in the making of his films was heretical to the American movie assembly line, with each studio having its in-house style of lighting and camera work. Moreover, screenwriters, cinematographers worked for and were loyal to the studio, not the director. So Lang was no longer the ultimate autocrat on his movie sets as he had been in Berlin. He also had to master English. And this doesn't mean not just how to read, write, and speak a new language. Lang had to learn how to think, to scheme, to fantasize in a new language, and this was extremely difficult. He also had a lot of enemies. Lang could be insufferably arrogant, and he did make a lot of enemies when he was riding high during his UFA days in Berlin. Many of these people who disliked Lang were part of the Hollywood German immigrant community. However, he ignored this, and he continued to create his own legacy while shunning some of the people he worked with earlier. For example, he ignored Seymour Nebenzal, who had produced M and the Testament of Dr. Mabuse. According to Seymour's son Harold, it was because his father knew Lang in Germany when a swastika flag flew from his house in Berlin. Lang's wife, Thea von Harbaugh, became an ardent Nazi supporter, in effect a de facto Nazi, which was another principal reason for the end of their marriage when Lang left Germany.
I'm afraid I might close the door to a quiet, familiar room where I'll be safe. There's a warm fire.
After a number of false starts at MGM, Lang directed the film Fury in 1935. Fury was about a falsely accused man played by Spencer Tracy being lynched. And there's a nice, beautifully composed shot of a semicircle of candles. But Fury was based on a 1933 incident in San Jose that later became the inspiration for Cy Enfield's Try and Get Me in 1950. With Fury, Lang made a great film. Some critics believe it's his best American film, but he ran into continual roadblocks that were nearly all self-created. He was perpetually aggrieved, angry, and arrogant. For example, Lang couldn't fathom that there was a law stating that extras needed to be fed after working 6 consecutive hours. There would be no more working people till they were passing out from exhaustion, as he had done in Metropolis. Lang also treated anyone who disagreed with him about the film as a mortal enemy. He hated producers, even the ones who tried to save him from himself. His treatment of cast and crew, who were already conditioned to the long hours and routine directorial tyranny of 1930s Hollywood, caused the crew of Fury to rig an arc light or a sandbag to fall on the director. Lang was saved by the intercession of producer Joe Mankiewicz.
A man I don't know at all.
Louis B. Mayer reportedly said after a post-production confrontation with Lang after Fury, "Even if it costs me $1 million or $2 million, this man is never going to make another movie at MGM."
But I'm afraid.
As Bennett now ruminates with second thoughts about marrying a complete stranger. However cliched this particular plot point appeared to critics, This type of situation was emblematic of Lang's romantic personality. He fell in love both easily and ardently.
Maybe I should have run away. Started on our honeymoon.
Lang's Hollywood conquests included Miriam Hopkins, Kay Francis, Marlene Dietrich, among many others. I'll state for the record that there is no credible account or evidence that Joan Bennett ever had an intimate relationship with Fritz Lang. Bennett appreciated Lang as a director who elicited some of her best performance in their previous films. However, Bennett was a tough cookie, and she began to turn away from Lang as their relationship deteriorated during the making of this particular film. Massive character actor Dan Seymour became a close friend of Lang and eventually was the executor of his estate. He claimed Lang's fearsome disposition on set overshadowed a kinder personality. There was certainly truth to this. Lang could be extremely charming. A young British assistant on this film named John Reed was absorbed into Lang's orbit. He described the director as a complex personality with a passionate belief in democracy, with a keen intellect that included a flair for storytelling, artistic composition, accompanied by a yen for the mystical and the macabre. And there's certainly no doubting that latter assessment. So, how many women, even in 1947, would marry a man who tells them that they are not allowed to think?
By instinct in a split second. There was a poet who said, "Women are happy and children and animals, but we human beings, we are not."
Michael Redgrave falling out of the hammock on the cement in that shot was a classic example of how Lang did things. Lang reportedly had him repeat it at least 6 times, falling on the cement, similar to how he had Peter Lorre fall down a flight of stairs in M so often that the actor couldn't walk for 3 days after the scene was shot.
But seriously, darling, I should have needed months of research to find a place like this.
I spoke with Hilda Roth, who was Lang's personal secretary during the making of Secret Beyond the Door and for a number of years thereafter. Miss Roth told me that she adored Fritz Lang, absolutely loved him. She said Lang treated her like a daughter. For example, when Rolf went to Europe, Lang had friends take her out to dinner and look out after her while she was there. When she started working for him, she didn't have a car to go to work, so Lang drove her to work. Rolf saw Lang as a kindly, considerate man who was an utterly driven perfectionist when it came to movie making. She told me when she witnessed Lang screaming at actors in this film like Redgrave, Natalie Schafer, Barbara O'Neill, she would have to leave the set because it was too upsetting to stand there and watch. This type of behavior was typical of several foreign immigrant directors. Michael Curtiz and Otto Preminger come immediately to mind. However, Fritz Lang's micromanaging directorial style, combined with the fearsome temper and monumental ego, really plumbed frigid depths. He also insisted on wearing the monocle that increased his image as the stormtrooper of Hollywood directors.
Akita's sense of timing needs adjustment. I was just going to mix you a drink.
Yes. This picture may have the longest consummation of a marriage on film. On set, as a director, Lang disassembled scenes into second-by-second degrees of minutia. As with the straws in Joan Bennett's drink, he would manipulate props, move food around in a dish, tilt a cup at an angle, and make actors do scenes again and again and again. He controlled even the slightest gesture by an actor. Lang would snap his fingers when he wanted an actor to turn his or her head or incline it in a certain way.
Senora, let him wait. Get out.
Henry Fonda, after enduring a full day of this type of direction in You Only Live Once, with Lang maniacally micromanaging a short scene with 2 lines of dialogue comprised of actors sitting at a dinner table, remarked that it apparently didn't occur to the director that actors were human beings. Fonda likened Lang to a puppeteer manipulating marionettes.
200 strokes.
Thematically, Secret Beyond the Door was a Langian hybrid of what was currently in vogue those days in Hollywood. The psychology of Spellbound with the ham-handed plot dripping of Freud, the overtones of Rebecca that we'll get to shortly, a dash of Bluebeard. Lang was often compared to Alfred Hitchcock, something that both directors disliked intensely. Instead of the Master of Suspense, which was Hitchcock's nickname, Universal's initial publicity for this film dubbed Lang as the Master of the Unusual, before giving up that tagline as a bad job. Lang always felt that Hitchcock stole from him without attribution.
We won't be separated long. If I start now, I can make El Ballet.
This is the locked door plot point that Lang firmly implants as Redgrave's personality radically changes. They've fallen in love, he's on his honeymoon, a quick marriage, and now all of a sudden he has to leave on a business trip.
Fortunately, they're off a whole million for the day after tomorrow.
Lang's career arc through Hollywood before inking his partnership in Diana Productions that made this film and Scarlet Street and then this film was up and down. After leaving MGM, he made You Only Live Once. He then quickly wore out his welcome over at Paramount with the flop of You and Me in 1938. After becoming a U.S. citizen in 1939, Lang's career was kind of in decline and in limbo until he signed with agent Sam Jaffe. Jaffe steered him to Fox, where Lang made The Return of Frank James. He apologized to Henry Fonda to get him to work with him again, swore that he would alter his on-set behavior, and of course promptly reneged on that commitment. But he followed The Return of Frank James with another odor, Western Union, in 1941. Both of these films were commercially successful, and Lang was signed to a multi-picture directorial contract with Fox by Darryl F. Zanuck. Lang's interest in the American West was acute, and it dated back to seeing Buffalo Bill's Wild West show as a child in Vienna and voraciously reading Western dime novels. When he wasn't making movies, Lang traveled throughout the American West, taking his own home movies while sightseeing.
Just the perfect ending to a beautiful day.
In 1941, Lang directed Manhunt, about a British big game hunter played by Walter Pidgeon stalking Hitler. This was Lang's first film with Joan Bennett. Her performance as a Cockney streetwalker elevated her career as she embraced Lang's atomized direction technique. The picture was both a critical and box office success. Typically, Lang followed this triumph by getting into an adversarial relationship with Fox head Darryl Zanuck. Nothing made Lang more difficult to deal with than success. He essentially quit directing a picture titled Confirm or Deny. He later claimed he suffered a gallbladder attack. And then he followed that on Moontide by getting into a row with Jean Gabon. He reportedly gave Gabon, who was Marlene Dietrich's current heartthrob, a blow-by-blow of his own affair with Marlena and recommendations on how best to handle her, which caused Gabon to stalk off the set. Eventually, a fed-up Zanuck ended up dropping Lang's contract at Fox.
Thank you, Paquita, but you must be mistaken. Of course, there was no telegram.
Lang rebounded to direct another anti-Nazi film, Hangman Also Die, in 1943. This independent production, released by United Artists, was based on Lang's original story about the partisan assassination of Reinhard Heydrich, the notorious Nazi overlord of Czechoslovakia. This film would be rated as one of 1943's best pictures. Lang collaborated with independent producer and playwright Berthold Brecht, who would be denied screen credit for his work on the script as Lang chalked up yet another professional burning bridge. He also treated leading lady Anna Lee brutally in Hangman Also Die, telling a news outlet that she was a terrible actress, then denying it and claiming she was misquoted.
Why had he gone? Why had he lied?
The exquisite lighting and photography in Secret Beyond the Door was by the great cinematographer Stanley Cortez. The choice of director of photography, or DOP, was one of the contentious points between Lang, Joan Bennett, and producer Walter Wanger. Bennett loved how Cortez photographed her, so she and Wanger essentially forced Lang to accept Stanley Cortez as the DOP. Lang wanted Milton Krasner, who was busy on another picture. Krasner had shot Scarlet Street for him, and Cortez had a contractual obligation to Wanger. Cortez was a brilliant cinematographer and a former portrait photographer who shot the magnificent Ambersons for Orson Welles. But he wasn't Lang's choice, so that led to bad feelings and difficulties on set between the director and Cortez. Lang claimed that Cortez was too slow, a complaint that others who worked with the DOP would also make. But who was more methodical and paid less attention to schedules until he got what he wanted than Fritz Lang? In the end, Cortez's work is one of the movie's best attributes.
Closer. We stopped in front of the hacienda. Mark was in it. He'd come back. But I wasn't glad. I was afraid. And my fear woke me up. Yes?
So Bennett's honeymoon is a wash, but at least after her husband left her there, he sent her a note and invited her to the family home in Lavender Falls, New York. You know, one has to suspend their belief system to enjoy most movies, particularly a film noir. However, for Secret Beyond the Door, the sense of reality pertaining to the Bennett-Redgrave domestic situation is really put on total hiatus at time to time. Lang returned to Paramount and directed Ministry of Fear in 1944, a foreign thriller with Ray Milland uncovering a German espionage ring in London. The picture was a prima facie instance of Lang imitating Alfred Hitchcock. He ended up hating the film, as did writer Graham Greene, whose novel served as the basis for it. The sparkling photography and Langian action were offset by the control of Paramount's producer Seton I. Miller, whom Lang could not browbeat into submission. One reason Lang hated producers is he hated having his feet held to the fire on schedule, budget, and script.
Thank you.
Entering the picture now is the distinguished stage, film, and television actress Anne Revere. This is kind of a different part for Revere, who was especially affected and almost typecasted in matronly roles. Revere was nominated 3 times for Best Supporting Actress, The Song of Bernadette, Gentleman's Agreement, and winning the Oscar for National Velvet in 1944. Revere was a member of the Communist Party USA, CPUSA, and came under immediate assault during the blacklist period. She was on the board of the Screen Actors Guild, had to resign in 1951, and courageously took the Fifth Amendment in front of the House of Un-American Activities Committee, refused to name names, so she didn't work for films in Hollywood for 20 years. She eventually returned to appear Tell Me That You Love Me, Junie Moon. She reclaimed part of her career after leaving Hollywood. She worked in soap operas in New York and in the theater. She and her husband Samuel Rosen opened an acting school in New York. And yes, Miss Revere was a descendant of the American Revolutionary hero Silversmith Paul Revere. I like the way Revere summons the faithful footman Andy like the family dog by clapping her hands. Andy is played by actor Housley Stevenson. Stevenson sired a family of thespians that included Onslow Stevens, Housley Stevenson Jr., and Edward Stevenson. I always remember Stevenson's turn in Dark Passage as a plastic surgeon telling Humphrey Bogart before he operates, "Ever see a botched plastic job? I can make you look like a monkey." So here Lang's story now shifts to the overtones of Rebecca, with the sinister house, with Redgrave and his sister, with Revere as kind of an ersatz Mrs. Danvers. Naturally, there are more surprises to come. Returning to Lang's career, Nunnally Johnson was one of the highest paid writers in Hollywood when he formed International Pictures and wrote the screenplay for The Woman in the Window in 1944. Johnson allowed Lang a great deal of leeway, and the results were outstanding. Star Edward G. Robinson called Woman in the Window one of the most perfect scripts I've ever been involved in. The story of Robinson getting involved with a model played by Joan Bennett, followed by manslaughter and blackmail, was a triumph for Lang, and he reaped some of his best box office grosses ever. This movie set the stage for the formation of Diana Productions. Diana Productions was the partnership between producer Walter Wanger, his wife Joan Bennett, and Fritz Lang. Now, Walter Wanger was more of a cinematic manager at this point rather than a hands-on creative producer in the mold of Selznick, Thalberg, or Hal Wallace. He was a rare bird in Hollywood, an Ivy League Jew who became an independent producer. Wanger was an able man who served as an intel officer during World War I and joined President Woodrow Wilson's staff during the Paris Peace Conference. After the war to end all wars finally ended, Wanger became an executive at Paramount, where he coincidentally supervised the American release of Lang's epic Metropolis, followed by stints at Columbia and MGM. Wanger produced some enduring classic films, including Stagecoach, Foreign Correspondent, and The Long Voyage Home. Of course, it doesn't help to have John Ford and Alfred Hitchcock as your directors either. However, Wanger's modus operandi was very laissez-faire. He let his writers and directors make the film, and he stuck to watching the budget, financing, post-production, distribution, publicity, all of those types of things. Wanger first met Lang when he produced You Only Live Once, starring Sylvia Sidney. Both Sidney and Wanger became Lang's champions in Hollywood as the result of this picture, although Wanger would live to regret it. Even these static shots of Bennett walking around the house are just extremely well lit and well composed.
Carrie? I'm sorry.
If Anne Revere was Lang's version of Mrs. Danvers, Barbara O'Neill's character, seen here, might have been Lang's send-up on Dracula's Daughter. O'Neill was a skilled actress whose resume includes Stella Dallas and Gone with the Wind. She was nominated for Best Supporting Actress for All This in Heaven 2, and she also appeared in George Stevens' I Remember Mama as Osterholm-Olka's Uncle Chris's wife.
I suppose it's because of me. He was very much attached to his mother. I can understand how that makes him somewhat different.
O'Neill's monotone performance that resembles something of a somnambulist was a direct result of her being terrified by Fritz Lang.
Fine boy. Nervous, maybe, insensitive, but he resents domination.
That's ridiculous, Miss Roby.
Hilda Rolfe told me that Lang bullied O'Neill so badly that she couldn't remember her lines or even talk at certain points. But perhaps this is what Lang wanted from her all along.
Wish she'd mind her own business. Domination. I know what David needs. Love, of course, but a firm hand.
I suppose he misses his mother very much.
Eleanor pampered him. Probably because she and Mark became so completely estranged. The break was final after he came back from the war. He moved into the little room adjoining the study. When Eleanor became ill, she shut herself off from everything. Except David.
I noticed that none of Mark's things were in there. I was going to file a protest.
They came this afternoon. Sarah kept them in the refrigerator until you got here.
So La Bennett has found out about the house, the mother, and then it'll be the first wife as the appropriated plot points from Rebecca start piling up.
We keep a jersey.
Diana Productions was named for Bennett's eldest daughter by her first marriage. The production company was established with 1,000 shares of stock. Lang was the majority stockholder. He owned 506. Joan Bennett owned 316. Agent Sam Jaffe and showbiz attorney Martin Gang owned 33 apiece, with the remaining shares sold by Wanger to raise money. Both Gang and Lang, and how do you like that rhythm, insisted that Wanger, as the producer, not own any stock. But guess who financed most of the company via his wife? Walter Wanger put up the money. So Wanger financed the startup of Diana Productions, but was not allowed to own a share of stock in the company. He was totally an advisor. Wanger apparently believed that Lang should be the senior stockholder, quote, so he wouldn't have this inferiority complex and be so difficult. This well-intentioned but delusional perspective reminds me of that infamous John Huston line from the movie Chinatown, where Huston says to Jack Nicholson, "You may think you know whom you're dealing with, but believe me, you don't." In his biography of Walter Wanger, author Matthew Bernstein referred to Diana Productions as, quote, Fritz Lang Incorporated. Lang felt beholden to neither of his partners. However, he had to live with Wanger because if he fired him, the partnership deal that Wanger established between Diana and Universal would go down the drain. Universal had merged with International Pictures in 1945. British film magnate J. Arthur Rank teamed up with William Getz, L.B. Mayer's son-in-law, to reorganize the studio. Abandoned were Universal's style of wartime entertainment, the sword and sandal movies starring Maria Montez and John Hall, the Basil Rathbone, Nigel Bruce Sherlock Holmes films, Lon Chaney Jr. horror programmers, and so forth. The reconstituted studio was now called Universal International, and they began producing more prestigious films with production partners who included Chester Erskine, Mark Hellinger, Robert Montgomery, and most notably Diana Productions. So fingering the flower there. Once again, Bennett is abandoned, this time at the local train platform, by her most peculiar husband, who certainly has an unusual process towards consummating his marriage.
Morning, Mrs. Lamphere. You want Andy to take your trunks now?
Oh, thank you. Leave them here.
Yes.
Home. Home.
As she broods in the car on the way back. Diana Productions' debut film could not have been better. Scarlet Street was adapted by ace screenwriter Dudley Nichols from the French novel The Bitch. The film was similar, some would say identical in plot to The Woman in the Window, but was much more explicit in terms of content. Edward G. Robinson, Joan Bennett, and Dan Duryea were reunited with Lang after Woman in the Window. In Scarlet Street, Bennett plays a prostitute who gangs up with Duryea, who plays her dandified pimp and a straw boater. The pair blackmails a hapless Robinson who ends up murdering Bennett, as the film concludes with Robinson condemned to a bleak existence of Langian doom. Scarlet Street ran into local censorship problems as it was banned in New York, Atlanta, and Milwaukee. It didn't matter. The film became a huge hit, doubling the company's investment by returning over $2.5 million. Scarlet Street is arguably Lang's greatest American film, and Diana Productions' stock value doubled on account of it.
Andy, would you mind driving back to the station? I'd like you to pick up my trunks.
Yeah, Lang has Bennett here using a cigarette holder that I think went out of style in the 1920s, but he liked little touches like that. Here's another plot point that drops as Bennett now discovers that Redgrave also has a son played by Mark Dennis. The son is easily the most disturbing character in the film. Lang didn't care for children. He didn't have any, he didn't want any. And one reason that his relationship with Sylvia Richards, the screenwriter, ended in the 1950s is reputedly because Miss Richards had a pair of children from her first marriage and Lang didn't like them.
Miss Roby's told me lots of nice things about you. I like Miss Roby. Aunt Caroline wouldn't agree with you. What are you interested in, David? In what way? In becoming. An architect, too, I suppose. No.
This scene struck me that there is a possibility that Redgrave's son might grow up to become Norman Bates.
I appreciate that you're trying to make friends with me.
The tortured relationship in the film as kind of a sidebar that's portrayed between Redgrave's character and his son might be the most realistic aspect in the picture.
Let's leave it this way. Apparently you're honest. It's not usual in this house. I was prepared to dislike you, but I find I have nothing against you. I shall call you Mrs. Lanfear. Fair enough. I hope that later it's father.
As Lang began Secret Beyond the Door, the stage was set for an even bigger success than Scarlet Street, or so he believed. Between January 1946 and 1947, the relationship between Lang and Walter Wanger began to deteriorate. As Redgrave has finally returned home now, before the release of Scarlet Street, Wanger spearheaded what became a successful recut of the picture before it was issued, and this circumstance irked Lang to no end. The notion that any producer, particularly Wanger, had anything creative to do with one of Lang's pictures or would share credit for the success of a Lang picture was anathema to the director. He hated it. Lang wanted credit for everything on his pictures. For Secret Beyond the Door, he increasingly exerted his authority as the major stockholder for Diana Pictures in order to control the publicity for the picture as well as the content, production, every aspect. Lang's name needed to be preeminent on credits and all publicity releases. In addition to needing to feed his enormous ego, Lang also wanted to counter what had become a negative image around Hollywood. As previously mentioned, Wanger more or less let him have his head. Aside from his hands-off approach during production, Wanger believed, not without some justification, that Lang had been mistreated at Fox by Darryl Zanuck and by Bill Getz, who was also at Fox before coming to Universal. Wanger also had ambitions of his own in addition to tending to his wife's career.
Talking about Eleanor. Celia, she was a gentleman.
Fritz Lang needed the resources of a Hollywood studio in order to make his films. But his personality alienated those very people, such as Zanuck, L.B. Mayer, Getz, who allowed him to make movies. So Diana Productions was really his way out. As Lang viewed it, he would attach himself to Wanger and Bennett and control them, while letting the polished Wanger, who was currently a unit producer at Universal International, run interference with the studio, set up financing for the movies, while letting him alone to direct and make the movies. Just prior to Diana Productions, Lang had signed a contract with David O. Selznick and worked for Selznick for 3 weeks on a script before that deal fell apart due to Lang's demands for credit and control that the mercurial Selznick would be unwilling to cede to any director. For his part, Walter Wanger wanted bigger budget and a return to his days of producing films directed by John Ford and Alfred Hitchcock. Wanger raised money via the sale of Diana stock and arranged the bank loans to pay the principal talent and Universal's 20% overhead charges. Universal International repaid itself with 25% of the gross proceeds, and then the deal was they would split the profits of the movie with Diana.
One wrong word and boom, I'm talking to a shell that thick.
Family characteristic comes down from old Snapper Lamphere, known as the Swamp King. Now, I go and change my shell for dinner.
One more thing. I want to collect on that rain check you gave me in Mexico.
Finally, there is the scene that indicates that this attenuated marriage is being consummated.
We had passed our first dinner. A week later, we had our house.
This is a really nice overhead shot of the housewarming party and how it is designed with the rain coming down with everyone scurrying inside is really a nice pictorial invention by Lang and Stanley Curtiz.
There was unanimous agreement. Bless the rain. When it started, I was in the
This scene with Natalie Schaefer in front of the fire with Bennett, and then she's joined by James Say, standing in front of this roaring fire is a typical Lang touch. According to Schaefer, it was already unbearably hot on the sound stage. She said it was 110 degrees, and Lang made her stand in front of the fire for an unnecessarily a long time. Schaefer said Lang said to her very sarcastically, "Darling, I'm so sorry I had to do this to you." And Schaefer responded with, "That's all right, Mr. Lang, I'm a masochist." Natalie Schaefer said working with Fritz Lang on this picture was the most difficult experience of her career.
Punch drunk.
He hasn't a button. Not a blessed sou, except for what his magazine brings in. All this is mortgaged to the hilt.
Lang was always wary about avoiding a romance with a principal actor in one of his films. He was well aware of the obvious conflict of interest and the problems that could result from such a liaison. However, he didn't feel the same way about Sylvia Richards, the credited screenwriter for Secret Beyond the Door. When he couldn't obtain Rig Lardner Jr., who had written Cloak and Dagger for him, Lang hired Richards, a tawny redhead who was the ex-wife of screenwriter Robert L. Richards, to collaborate with him on Secret. Robert Richards was a Communist Party member who wrote the screenplay for the films noir Act of Violence and Johnny Stoolpigeon. He took the Fifth Amendment in front of UAC and had his career terminated by the blacklist. Sylvia Richards was also a disaffected communist who would testify as a friendly witness to UAC in 1951. By the time Lang hired her, she had completed the initial screenplay for the Joan Crawford hit Possessed at Warner Brothers. So we are now beginning the virtual tour of Redgrave's house with the attached rooms where infamous murders occurred.
Costs considerable to copy a room like this.
This isn't a copy. These are the original rooms, down to the last detail, as much as possible.
I bet there's a love story.
Not exactly.
What happened?
Apparently, the fact that Redgrave was discovered to be without a sou, as James Say earlier put it, makes one wonder how he orchestrated all these ornate additions to his mansion. It must have been all those mortgages, perhaps on the Black Museum installment plan.
His beloved wife, Celeste, secretly a Huguenot, she was nothing to him anymore.
When he hired Richards, Lang was then working on two properties, Secret Beyond the Door and Winchester 73, that would eventually end up being made by director Anthony Mann in 1950. Lang had Wanger purchase Rufus King's story from Red Book magazine, but later said that Wanger and Universal had forced the property on him. This was another falsehood that Lang would create about himself in his dotage.
The killer used the floods of 1913. This was the cellar of a house in Bath, Missouri, where the floods were especially severe. He was a sordid little rat.
Who was the victim?
His mother.
That's rather rare. Murder of a mother by her son. She's a brain psych major. In many cases, the murder of a girlfriend or a wife has its psychological roots in an unconscious...
You see actress speaking as Annabelle Shaw, who was also notable for her appearance in Shock, the outlaw noir classic Gun Crazy, as well as City Across the River.
He tied her to that chair. The waters were rising.
I like the way that Joan Bennett and Say exchange looks here. And Bennett's is like, yes, I guess I did marry a fruitcake. Sylvia Richards and Lang proved to be a complicated working relationship, but only for Richards. The pair had met when Lang was directing Cloak and Dagger at Warner Brothers. Soon they were lovers. Despite Richards being 30 and young enough to be the director's daughter, Jan Reed thought that Lang and Richards were absolutely made for one another. Richards later claimed that the director wanted to marry her. She accompanied Lang on his trips through the American West, and the couple actually took up square dancing.
He swore that he never intended to murder. But what he hoped for...
However, do-si-doing together did not make for the efficient development of a script that would prove to be the film's Achilles heel.
Unholy emanation from this room.
According to Richards, Lang essentially dictated the words, with Richards writing and organizing his thoughts into coherent sentences. She said later that she, quote, had no feeling for the story and her stomach remained in a knot of disapproval, unquote. And this was over the viability of a script that she said later afterwards had no believability whatsoever.
But he still killed.
She also professed to be so much in love and in awe of Lang that she just couldn't raise her concerns with what they were doing with him, as far as the screenplay goes.
No murder would be necessary.
Joan Bennett became aware of the relationship and distanced herself from Lang. During Scarlet Street, Lang and Bennett collaborated off-set on the nuances of the screenplay and what was going to be shot from one day to the next, and would engage in what Bennett called stimulating, thrilling arguments. Now, the star avoided coming into Lang's office when he was working with Richards on the script. One of the other strengths of Secret Beyond the Door is the great music score composed by Hungarian movie composer Miklos Rózsa. A Rózsa score boosted every movie he ever worked on. His lengthy and distinguished noir resume includes Double Indemnity, Dark Waters, The Killers, The Strange Love of Martha Ivers, The Red House, Brute Force, Desert Fury, The Naked City, Crisscross, The Asphalt Jungle, and I think I might have missed a couple. Rózsa's experience working with Lang on this film provides a validation of the director's paradoxical personality. Rózsa wrote in his memoir that Lang had been a hero of his ever since he saw the Nibelungen in Budapest and later M in Berlin. However, he conceded that Lang's Hollywood reputation was that of, quote, a Teutonic monster, a schoolmaster-like slave driver. Rózsa said he was surprised to find Lang as one of the most charming, witty, cultured, and entertaining men I had ever met in a film studio. Lang told the composer that he had seen Spellbound and The Lost Weekend that Rózsa scored, and that, according to Rózsa, I was finally going to get a psychological picture in which the psychology was correct.
Isn't it complete?
Yes.
Then don't let's...
As we come to the ominous locked door number 7.
Why, it's not.
Although Rocha conceded that the script for Secret Beyond the Door was not nearly as good as those earlier pictures he scored, he worked closely with Lang on the music score, playing his music as the director watched the film. Rocha said Lang complimented him, encouraged him, and offered constructive suggestions about the music, unlike Alfred Hitchcock, who never came to the recording studio during Spellbound and didn't even deign to congratulate Rocha for winning the Oscar for the Spellbound score, not even sending him a telegram or a postcard. Shortly after production began, Michael Redgrave began to have doubts about the film. He took the film and had banked on, but it's Fritz Lang. But now he felt the check was bouncing. According to Lang, Redgrave's line readings were all wrong, he didn't hit his marks the way he should, and the actor began to wilt under the pressure from the director. Joan Bennett's daughter, Diana Anderson, was a frequent visitor to the set and told author Brian Kello that, quote, Michael Redgrave was a mess. Fritz was being very naughty. He was diabolical and cruel. Maybe he thought he was going to get a good performance that way. She said Lang had absolute confidence in his way of doing things, and on the set, there was only Lang's way of doing things.
And when I met you at the station,
I don't know what you're talking about, Celia.
it was the way you immersed yourself in those stories, as if you were almost happy about their deaths. Mark, what's in the 7th room?
It will never be shown to anyone. Not even to you.
Oh, Mark, what do you mean by never?
But what do I mean?
I'm not just curious, darling. I don't mean to pry. I want to understand you, remember?
I have to live my own life. Since I was a child, I've been hemmed in by women wanting to live it for me. Caroline, Eleanor, and now you too. No thanks.
Mark, surely there can't be anything in the room worth quarreling about.
I don't want to discuss it. The room is locked and stays locked.
I guess the room's locked. Michael Redgrave, Sir Michael after he was knighted in 1959, came from an acting family that has become dynastic. His father, Roy Redgrave, was a stage and silent film actor born in Britain and later settled in Australia. Redgrave's mother, Margaret Daisy Scudamore, was also a thespian. Michael Redgrave was born in 1908. The tradition in the family would be continued after Redgrave married actress Rachel Kempton. Redgrave's children, Vanessa, Lynn, and Corin, all became distinguished actors, with Vanessa's daughters, Natasha and Jolie Richardson, following suit. There's many more to it, but I'll cut it off at this point, except to say the Redgrave acting family has spanned 5 generations and counting. Michael Redgrave's household was not a template from Family Circle or Reader's Digest, however. Redgrave was bisexual. During the filming of Secret Behind the Door, Michael Redgrave met a man named Bob Michael, whom he took as a lover and introduced into his household. His wife apparently had the proverbial patience of a saint. Joan Bennett had a similar acting lineage, albeit on a smaller scale. Her father was the hard-drinking Richard Bennett, who was one of the greatest American stage actors of the early 20th century, who quickly became forgotten and actually was dependent on the largesse of his daughters, who supported him into his old age. Her mother was Adrienne Morrison, an actress and later a literary agent. The couple's eldest daughter, Joan's sister, Constance Bennett, had a movie career that took off like a rocket. She achieved apogee as Hollywood's most popular and highly paid actress in 1931, with a salary of $30,000 per week before her career hit the skids by the end of the decade. Barbara Bennett, the third sister, was an actress-dancer whose brief career was truncated by alcoholism and manic depression. Joan, born in 1910, took longer to reach her potential, but had a career that endured. Yeah, this scene between the father and son confrontation between Redgrave and Mark Dennis, to me, is the most disturbing sequence in the entire picture. And as you'll notice, it is Redgrave that does all the confronting. He's obviously deeply disturbed.
But David, my dear, I can see why you might. I wish you'd try and understand me as well.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Lamphere,
As is Dennis.
but you must never interfere between him and me. You see, he killed my mother.
Funny. Why do I keep on thinking about red carnation?
So Bennett's just been informed by her husband's son that her new husband killed his first wife, and what occurs to her is carnations. I wonder if this is the accurate psychology that Lang told Miklas Rocha about.
The gardener found her husband's wallet.
As a child, Joan Bennett appeared with her parents initially in a 1916 silent film, but her career actually took root as an ingenue. She was a natural blonde in the early 1930s. She co-starred in She Wanted a Millionaire with Spencer Tracy, was in an early version of Moby Dick with John Barrymore in 1930, and then in Little Women with Katharine Hepburn. Despite these successes, Joan was not viewed as an actress of consequence until Lang got a hold of her in Manhunt, followed by Woman in the Window and Scarlet Street. Pushing 40 and totally invested in Lang in Secret Beyond the Door, Bennett doubtlessly felt it starting to slip away.
She became ill. The desire to live might have turned the balance.
The festering issue between her and Lang over the cinematographer eventually came to a head. In the middle of the production, Lang tried to fire Stanley Cortez, whom he believed was too slow. Bennett objected. When Bennett supported Cortez instead of Lang, the mercurial director viewed it as the ultimate betrayal. The breach between Lang and Bennett became irreparable as the picture began to fall behind schedule.
Always gave her her best himself. Mr. Mark is the soul of kindness.
I know, Sarah. I know.
Walter Wanger identified that the schedule was slipping in a series of memorandums. Lang immediately blamed Cortez. Of course, the director's habit of taking a large number of takes and printing the first, 8th, and perhaps the 17th shot, a random Lang touch that dated back to his glory days with Erich Palmer at UFA, had nothing to do with the schedule slippage. Some delays were truly not Lang's fault. Joan Bennett had a minor operation during the production that delayed some of her scenes for several days. But Lang's icy, abusive demeanor and refusal to give an inch on anything made everything else academic. Above all else, it was Ranger's recut of Scarlet Street and that film's subsequent success that fueled Lang's resentful condescension towards both of his partners.
Mark, it's such an impossible situation.
There's no time to listen. I'm in a hurry. I'm having dinner in town.
The key, what lies within the locked murder room. A cynical rejoinder might be, has anyone not figured it out yet? Lang's deportment should not have been a surprise to anyone, particularly Joan Bennett. Prior to the formation of Diana Productions, Lang directed the spy thriller Cloak and Dagger at Warner Brothers for producer Milton Sperling. Among other things, the genial Sperling was Harry Warner's son-in-law. Despite his best efforts to placate Lang on nearly every issue, the relationship between the director and producer spilled into open warfare. After being hired by Sperling, Lang, according to his biographer Patrick McGilligan, treated the producer like dirt under his fingernails. There were the usual problems with the script, the budget, etc., similar to every other movie ever made in Hollywood. But Lang made everything worse. He acted professionally with the miscast Gary Cooper while treating Lily Palmer, who was not his choice for the female lead, abominably. Bennett stopped by the Cloak and Dagger set and offered Palmer advice on how to deal with Lang. "Do you know how I used to greet him, loud and clear, every morning when we were shooting?" she asked Palmer. "I'd say, 'Good morning, Fritz, you old son of a bitch,' right in front of everybody." That took the wind out of his sails. You've got to get it in first. Unfortunately, Lily Palmer was unsuited for calling anybody out as an SOB and suffered miserably. At this point, on Secret Beyond the Door, matters had progressed past the point of a good morning between Lang and his partners. All three of them now were locked in a death embrace on a film that many people involved, less Lang, began to have serious doubts about.
Caroline and Eleanor wanted me out of the house. Afterward, everybody was very grateful. Gratitude has been my social security.
As we see, the burn scar on Barbara O'Neill's face is so obscure to be barely visible. Obviously, her obsession with covering it is another purely psychological plot point. And in a way, the subtlety of that plot point kind of serves as a metaphor for the entire film. The dreamlike Lebensraum that Lang and Curtiz created on this set-bound movie is visually compelling and composed of beautifully dramatic moments, except the pieces simply don't fit together coherently, particularly not for 1948 audiences, at least.
Where is your purse?
From the beginning, the production of Secret appeared to be snake-bit. Lang and Sylvia Richards took over 8 months to complete the script, while that ate up a lot of Diana Productions' overhead. There were significant delays that had nothing to do with Lang. Lang ended up accusing the Universal costume designer, a man named Travis Banton, of negligence by having to rework selected wardrobe that did not match the sketches approved by the director. Universal International also overran projected costs on set design and effects. The wind machines at the Lavender Falls train station, for example. There were camera and sound recorder breakdowns that also occurred. But because of these delays, Universal still didn't adjust any of their charges to Diana for this, so the production company had to absorb these. I love this scene, the lighting with Bennett opening the door, her shadow cast on the wall, the deep focus look. This is something that's worthy of John Alton. This sequence with Redgrave showering also was the cause of a delay in the production. While they were filming this, the water pipes burst, the set had to be cleared because it was flooded, and then repairs had to be made. Miss Bennett makes the copy of the key. But it was really Lang who was driving his production company into the ground with his mania for perfection that paid no heed to budget or schedule considerations. Production memoranda from the film, as documented in Matthew Bernstein's biography of Walter Wanger, note that Lang was shooting upwards of 27 takes of each single shot. For the opening with Bennett and Natalie Schaefer seated at the Mexican cantina table, Lang shot 24 different takes. Hilda Rolf wrote an article in 1992 for Film Comment about Lang that dubbed him as the perfectionist. And that was exactly who Lang was as a filmmaker. From the point of view of Wanger, perfection was wonderful, but if you want to continue to make movies with your own or other people's money, there is also the word done that needs to be factored into a director's repertoire. Bennett thought that Lang on this film was a Jekyll and Hyde character, calm and purposeful one moment, off on a tirade the next.
When you defended him.
This theme of Redgrave's character murdering his wife was extremely close to the bone where Fritz Lang was concerned. Lang's first wife was named Lisa Rosenthal, and Rosenthal caught her husband in flagrante delicto with Thea von Harbaugh. When Rosenthal walked in and viewed Lang and von Harbaugh engaged with what Lang termed heavy petting on a divan, she went into the bedroom of their apartment and shot herself with Lang's pistol. One account had Lang finding her dead in the bathtub, shot through the chest. Many people close to Lang in those early days in Berlin raised doubts about the death of his first wife, including cinematographer Karl Freund. There were more than a few people in Germany that believed that Lang killed his wife. He survived the scandal because Thea von Harbaugh backed up his account with the police, and producer Erich Palmer put the kibosh on some of the bad publicity. Lang almost never spoke about this matter. Nearly all his friends and colleagues in America knew nothing about the episode. They didn't even know that he had a first wife before Thea von Harbaugh. However, the large number of suicides, murders, and problematic deaths of the characters in Lang's films throughout the years give the indication that this tragedy was never far from his consciousness. Secret Beyond the Door fits in alongside a subgenre of post-World War II films noir and psychological films. These films shifted the gender away from the tried and true noir trope of an ex-serviceman returning home to find an unfaithful wife or a mistaken identity due to the habitual case of amnesia that screenwriters fell in love with. The female derivative of these films appropriated the woman in peril theme and blended it vigorously with elements of madness and Freud. The results were films with an entourage of female protagonists who don't really know who their husbands are, except that they turn out to be bad news, nuts, or usually both. Examples include My Name is Julia Ross, Gaslight, Undercurrent, The Two Mrs. Carrolls, Sorry Wrong Number, Caught, and Sylvia Richards' Possessed, among other films. In Secret Beyond the Door, Lang took this theme to extremes, both in terms of character motivation and the irrelevance of any plausibility. I think Lang aimed this film at a niche rather than a populist audience, and from a commercial perspective, that turned out to be a grave mistake. And yes, it is her bedroom. Michael Redgrave's take on his American debut was that the script doomed the picture. He called it a sow's ear and a half. I could never bring myself to see it. Redgrave said that the film had a silly story, pseudo-psychological and pretentious, but as Lang had just made two very successful and exciting pictures out of stories that seemed to me to be equally preposterous, I accepted it. I wanted to work with Lang. I thought I could learn something from him. Redgrave finished by saying, I certainly learned one thing, even if I did not know that in 99 cases out of 100, the creative germ of a picture is in its idea. With a good germinating idea and with the help of a good script, you have the best chance of making a good picture. That was really a polite way that Redgrave thought that the script for Secret Beyond the Door was lousy. The visual artistry of this picture is stunning. The cuts, the lighting, these scenes with Bennett running through the darkened house, it was a great effect, but it was extremely uncomfortable for Bennett because apparently during some of these sequences he actually strapped the lights to her, which is difficult to see, but apparently it was very uncomfortable for Bennett. However, enduring physical pain was part of the price of performing in a movie directed by Fritz Lang. This entire sequence, you forget about the cliches in the script or the plot or anything, and you lose yourself in the visual motif of Bennett now realizing that her husband is planning to kill her, and in this gloomy old house with Barbara O'Neill, who's probably off her rocker, and also the accentuation of Roja's great score. So the movie, the skill of so many people involved in this movie, Lang, Curtiz, Rocha, the actors, it transcends really the problematic issues with the script. This is a beautifully composed scene where she runs into the woods by the house with the fog. Incidentally, this is the same Universal set where Lon Chaney Jr. pursued Fay Helm and Evelyn Ankers in The Wolfmen in 1941, along with many other like films. I think this scene, as the end of the picture approaches, you can see how this is where part of Lang's footage was removed from the film. And now we shift from the Bennett voiceover to that of Redgrave's, which I think is one of Lang's cleverer notions. even though it was not well accepted by most critics and audiences. Certainly it was an ephemeral shift that added to the painstakingly constructed psychological climax by Lang.
The record shows that you met your wife only this spring in Mexico. Yes.
However creative this sequence is, for critics, it was one more brick in what had become a virtual wall of implausibility in the film.
No. That came later. There is a rumor that you also killed your first wife, Helena. No. I blamed myself. That's why I built the room. She died because I...
This courtroom fantasia, the way it's shot, reminds me of Boris Inkster's a sequence from Boris Inkster's Stranger on the Third Floor.
No man is responsible.
But I think the explanatory dialogue about the imagined murder is just allowed to go on for too long of a period of time.
My life I was dominated by women. As a child by my mother. And she left me. And she died by Caroline.
After production on Secret Beyond the Door was completed, the film was finished 18 days behind schedule and $200,000 over budget. So when it was finally done, Fritz Lang edited the film, and then there was a preview of his initial cut. And this preview can only be described as an unmitigated disaster. The preview cards were terrible, and many of the people involved in the picture that had kind of told themselves that it was Fritz Lang and the picture wouldn't be received as badly as it seemed, they were right. It was worse. The preview cards had comments such as, "Beyond human endurance, it stinks." Min Selvin, who managed Lang's office, said at the preview, which turned into a wake, said, "We were absolutely sick about the fact that it was a bad picture. We were in terrible, terrible shock." Sylvia Richards and Lang afterwards retreated to a nearby bar, and the director rationalized that the audience was composed of young Bobby Soxers who simply didn't understand the film. As Richards said later, Lang kind of came up with this excuse and he hadn't learned to trust the audience. But the climax of Redgrave coming to grips with his phobia and the imaginary murder of his wife was a bridge too far for audiences. As Richards summarized it, the film had no believability, none.
Miss Caroline wonders, are you coming down to breakfast?
Afterwards, there was a second, more favorable preview, but it was too late for Lang. The Universal International studio head, William Getz, took the film away from Lang, recut it, wouldn't let him watch it until he had excised over 17 minutes, including changing the original voiceover narrative a different actress with that of Joan Bennett. Lang rightfully went through the roof and threatened to remove his name from the picture. The footage that Getz removed has disappeared, so we will probably never see Lang's final cut of Secret Beyond the Door, unfortunately.
Make out your final check. I want you to leave Blaze Creek as soon as possible.
Mark!
I ask a certain amount of loyalty of my employees. Miss Roby has demonstrated very plainly that she will go to some lengths to keep me.
She told you. I was stupid enough to trust her when she said she wouldn't. Now you don't have to be grateful anymore.
Walter Wanger knew what Getz was doing by cutting the picture was wrong, but he couldn't do anything about it. Wanger wrote Getz one of his carefully crafted diplomatic memos of protest that was ignored. Wanger was bailing out of the studio anyway to produce pictures with the newly formed Eagle Lion Studios.
But Mark, now I'll have to stay. I gather from your attitude that Celia has gone somewhere.
When Secret Behind the Door was finally released in January 1948,
You'll be alone.
after 8 months of tinkering in the edited room, it was both a critical and box office disaster. The reviews were scathing. They were the worst of Fritz Lang's long career. The picture lost more money than any other Universal International release that year, and the studio canceled their relationship with Diana Productions, which soon went defunct and just went out of business. In order to stay afloat, Lang had to sell the screen rights to Winchester 73. Walter Wanger summarized the history of Diana Productions as 2.5 years of misery with Lang. About Lang, he said, although he wouldn't write a letter without my dictating it for him, he wanted all the credit. It's just been a nightmare. And here we have Joan Bennett's return to the house to save her husband. And this is undoubtedly, from her disappearance to her reappearance, this seems to where the studio removed some of Lang's version of the film, because this transition not only seems to be forcefully abrupt, but it lacks the nuance that characterizes much of the preceding film. After Walter Wanger left Universal and Diana Productions, his two films that he made at Eagle Lion were Tulsa, a Technicolor opus about the oil industry starring Susan Hayward that was an abject failure. He followed with Reign of Terror, also known as The Black Book, which is a terrific French Revolutionary film noir directed by Anthony Mann. And did you know there was such a thing as a French Revolutionary film noir? That picture turned a small profit. Wanger followed both of these films with the biggest gamble of his career. He ended up producing Joan of Arc, a $4.5 million epic that he mortgaged himself to the hilt in order to get made. Joan of Arc was eventually released through RKO in 1948. It was directed by Victor Fleming, starred Ingrid Bergman, and it was a leaden, stultifying box office failure. Bergman's subsequent affair with director Roberta Rossellini certainly didn't help the box office either. Wanger also made The Reckless Moment, which was then summarily and unfairly dismissed and is now regarded as an absolutely terrific film noir directed by Max Opels, and it's highlighted by what I consider Joan Bennett's finest screen performance. But this wasn't all due to Wanger. Other studios, producers were going through the same thing. What with the blacklist, the antitrust agreement that forced the big five movie studios in Hollywood to divest themselves of their theater chains, and the advent of television, it was a challenging time for the American movie industry, particularly for an independent producer like Walter Wanger.
3 hours, there'll be 100 miles between us. In 3 weeks, 10,000. Let's get away from her as far as possible.
Beautiful shot.
Morning from New York. I forgot some. At home.
Lang and Joan Bennett made up to a certain degree after it was all over, choosing to remember their earlier successes. Both star and director moved on then rather than dwelling about the failure of Secret Beyond the Door.
Mr. Lanfear's gone to New York. No, I don't know when he's coming back. Good night, Mr. Roberts.
Now we are approaching the climax where Lang's Freudian psychology plot reaches its full flower, as it were. Sylvia Richards was really downcast over the premiere. You know you're in trouble when the audience laughs in all the wrong places. That locked door in Mexico was behind it all. As Richard summarized it, so he, Redgrave, goes nuts over the smell of flowers and has all those rooms in his house. Joan Bennett's screen career after this movie experienced a market upswing in 1950. But her transition to Fritz Lang's Vamp and Woman in the Window and Scarlet Street to Elizabeth Taylor's mother and father of the bride was not a harbinger of future success, particularly for a 40-year-old Hollywood leading actress. She continued to raise her daughters and did a lot of stage work beginning in the mid-1950s. Bennett had a revival with the TV horror soap opera Dark Shadows that also spawned a movie she appeared in, and her final screen appearance was in the Italian movie Suspire. Joan Bennett died at the age of 80 in 1990. Wanger and Bennett remained married until 1965. Their union suffered a seismic scandal in December 1951. Bennett was apparently having an affair with an agent, later the producer Jennings Lang. No relation to Fritz. I don't want to mix my Langs up here. But in a fit of jealous rage, Wanger shot Lang, the agent, in the testicles during a parking lot confrontation in Hollywood. Wanger went to prison for 4 months, and it was thought by many that his career would be over. However, when he got out, he gained a toehold at Allied Artists and produced a film, Riot in Cell Block 11, directed by Don Siegel. And this film that he kind of dedicated to the cause of prison reform, because he was appalled after spending 4 months at the county farm where he was incarcerated. This film was a moneymaker, even though it was a B movie, and it got great reviews. And it really put him back in the game in Hollywood. And it was noted that people who weren't talking to him at all after Riot in Cell Block 11, he returned from the dead to Hollywood professionally, so to speak. Wanger followed with the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers, a classic film. I Want to Live with his former contractee, Susan Hayward, who won an Oscar, and then completed his career with another bloated epic, Cleopatra, that nearly bankrupted 20th Century Fox. Wanger died in 1968.
Mother and father were separated. I didn't care. She was my whole world. I was with her in the garden that afternoon. Bees humming over the flowers. She picked masses of lilac. I helped her carry them to the house. We put some in every room.
Locking the door. What about locking the door?
She was going out that night, dancing. I was jealous. Carrie teased me. She always teased me. I begged Mother not to go. And finally, she said that when I was ready for bed, I could come to her room and she'd read to me. It would have meant so much. She should have known. When I was ready for bed, I went to the door.
I think this revelatory scene with him coming to grips with his phobia is what made the film so unbelievable to contemporary audiences.
I pounded on the door until there was blood on my hands. The nails were torn to the quick. I ran to the window and I saw her drive away with a man. I called her and I cried.
Lang actually had one of his actors in Metropolis pound on a door during the scene till his hands were literally bloody.
Crushed them. Killed them. I wanted to kill her. I was only 10. I hated her. I knew that someday, tonight,
Carolyn, lock the door.
No, Mark, it wasn't your mother. It was Carolyn. She told me. She told me. Mark.
Lang added this fire scene at the end of the picture. It was not part of the original story from Red Book.
That's what I heard. The key turn.
Stay on the side.
This sequence with them escaping from the house, absolutely stunning. And if you'll notice, Lang had Redgrave and Bennett run through and crawl around the fire. No doubles were used. This might be an embellished story, but witnesses that were on the set at that time said that Lang had them run through this scene so many times that it almost seemed like brutality. According to one observer, it seemed like Redgrave crawled through the fire at least 185 times. The Langian obsession with reality definitely encompassed smoke inhalation. Also, as an aside, it's interesting to note how many of Wanger's post-war films ended with fire. The Lost Moment, Smash Up, The Story of a Woman, Canyon Passage, Tulsa, Reign of Terror, and naturally Joan of Arc. But all of these films ended up with a cataclysmic fire scene. And at one point, someone brought that to Wanger's attention, and he was just absolutely startled, as if he was completely unaware of it. There might be some psychology involved in that might have proved interesting to look at. Of course, he has to rescue Joan. Yeah, Barbara O'Neill. If Sidney Greenstreet was in the cast, he'd probably offer that Barbara O'Neill was doubtlessly careless with matches. Fritz Lang was pushing 60 when Diana Productions folded. His eyesight was failing, and he had to dodge the UAC witch hunters as he descended into lower-budgeted B pictures. He made House by the River at Republic, another dark Langian project during which he belittled Jane Wyatt and caused her to stalk off the set until he apologized. But his directorial skills sustained him even as his personality continued to leave a trail of scorched earth through Hollywood sound stages. He directed his last film in 1960 before assuming the mantle of legendary director emeritus. And as Daryl Zanuck shrewdly pointed out, Fritz Lang was always most agreeable after he had a failed picture. Success was the fuel for the fiery furnace of an ego that brought out the worst side of his complex personality. Cultured, charming, perfectionist, genius, and yes, part demon. This was all of Fritz Lang, and so was Secret Beyond the Door. This has been Alan K. Rohde. Thanks for listening.